Let's head up north right now, taking a live look at Harbor Springs this morning. That's where the landscape is drastically different after those spring ice storms back in March. We were up north just after the ice storms, and take a look at what it looked like. The ice proved destructive to the trees, causing many to snap from the weight. Crews have spent months recreating the landscape in parks and campgrounds. This is video from around the beginning of the month showing that destruction. According to the DNR, all the campgrounds and parks are now open. However, about 60% of the trails are still closed. Let's put this into some context. According to the DNR, more than 900,000 acres of state forest land were affected. And of trails up north, right now about 1,200 miles of trails are open. Nearly 1,700 miles are still closed. As a result of this, a major 10-year state forest management plan is now being delayed by at least a year. The State Forest Management Plan is a federally required plan to manage all 19.3 million acres of Michigan's public and private forests. The Michigan DNR is working on revising its information to account for all of the storm damage. Joining us to talk about that delay and the changing landscape of northern Michigan, Dan Heckman, who is a forest planning and modeling specialist with the Michigan DNR. Thank you so much for joining us, Dan. What's really interesting to me is that this storm hit, the cleanup began. You've done a phenomenal job cleaning up what we could see, but I don't think many people realize how this affects your long-term plans up there.
Yeah, the ice damage really had a severe impact to trees of all species across that 900,000 acres. And, we rely on the health and vigorous nature of those trees to have a sustainable forest for folks to enjoy, and also to support a sustainable forest industry.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of what your plans are and how they change, what happens next?
Well, we're in the stages of assessment right now, trying to determine what the impacts were to those trees from that ice damage and how severe or light those impacts are. We're looking at different forest cover types across the landscape to try and determine what actions we take next. Some of them are pretty evident right away, and we could start salvage operations almost immediately on some cover types like planted red pine. You've probably seen some of the videos where those trees are completely removed. The tops are just gone. And so that's obviously a place where we can get in and start to salvage some of that timber and start to clear roads and trails and things like that. Other areas aren't quite as obvious. The damage is a little bit less severe, but still widespread, and it's still going to cause some forest health issues and definitely some slower growth in some trees.
Gotcha. I don't know anything about your industry and how you do what you do. So can you kind of walk us through the process of how much mitigation needs to happen by humans and how much of Mother Nature and the landscape can kind of repair itself?
Yeah, it's important to remember that this was a natural event. It's a fairly rare event, especially to the extent that this storm and the damage that it caused. But it was a natural event, and so trees have mechanisms to deal with things like this. And if a stem or individual tree was to succumb to its injuries and die, then that will be replaced by regenerating trees underneath that. So seeds are constantly thrown every year, every couple of years by different tree species, and those seeds will germinate and become new trees. And so we tend to intervene a little bit there and try to steer the forest in different directions and grow certain tree species and maybe encourage one group of tree species versus another. And that's really what active forest management is all about. And so we can, rather than letting natural processes take place across the entire state forest, we let that happen on a proportion of it. But we also get involved and start to harvest different forest types in different ways that help steer it in different directions and get desirable habitat and desirable wood and forest products that we all use, for things like construction and, different building materials and lots of other products like furniture and flooring and things like that.
Yeah, I know you've spent probably a countless number of hours out there working on this project and the cleanup itself too. Were you surprised at how much damage was there, or did you know that what you were walking into would be as bad because of all the ice and the weight?
Yeah, so there was, those of us that lived through that, you could hear the trees coming down or the tops cracking, falling out, or branches coming off these trees all night long and for several consecutive days. And so it wasn't really a safe place to be to get out and survey inside of the forest, just because of the amount of debris coming down at any given time. And then the weather stayed cold and that ice stayed in those trees, and then we had a pretty significant wind event which brought down even more. All right, so we, those of us that were kind of in the middle of this figured what it would be like, but we've never seen anything like this across this broad of an area and to this extent of damage. And so it was pretty eye-opening once you actually tried to drive around, just driving down normal forest roads that we've always been able to access to do management or to do some sort of recreation, and they're completely plugged. Right, you couldn't go anywhere hardly at all in that roughly 3 million acre area.
Right.
And so
right.
it was pretty significant. It was pretty surprising.
Yeah. Dan, we're going to take a quick 90-second break, and we're going to continue our conversation in just a moment.
All right.
Welcome back, everybody. We are talking with Dan Heckman with Michigan DNR this morning. Dan, I wanted to ask you, before I came back home here to Detroit, I spent a lot of time in California. And one thing that always caught me by surprise is that while wildfires were devastating, it was also very helpful and regenerative to Mother Nature out there. Is there a silver lining in these ice storms that kind of gives Mother Nature a chance to regenerate some areas that needed some help?
Yeah, I think the silver lining might be more from a habitat perspective. Lots of coarse woody debris is what we call it, and that's really just fallen branches and trees that lay on the forest floor. That's a sign of a healthy forest ecosystem. The abundance of which we see now is probably way more than what's necessary to have a healthy forest from this disturbance. But nonetheless, that's probably a silver lining there for wildlife habitats. There's lots of small mammals and insects that will thrive in those microenvironments that are created from this debris on the forest floor. And it created a lot of standing snags where there, things like woodpeckers and cavity nesting species will certainly benefit.
Yeah.
So that could be a silver lining for sure.
So we talked about your 10-year plan here. Looking at the amount of work that still needs to be done and all the regrowth that needs to happen now, does this push this plan back another year, 2 years, 5 years, or do you have to kind of assess as you go over the next couple of years?
Yeah, you asked, about the status of where we're at, and we were starting to talk about assessment, and really that's the first stage, right? We assess the amount of damage, and then once we have a pretty good handle on that, where we can project that assessment across the rest of the acreage, we will incorporate an adjustment to our harvest schedules and our planning efforts in order to kind of fold that into the rest of the state forest plan. We anticipate that plan being delayed approximately 1 year. So while we get this assessment done and then analyze the impacts and incorporate that into our forest model, and then execute that, that'll support our new plan for this area. The ice storm damaged about a quarter of the state forest. The state forest is roughly 4 million acres, and that 900,000 acres is close to a quarter of that. So it's a pretty big impact, and definitely something we need to make sure that we adapt to and have a sustainable plan moving forward.
Now,
and
for
that'll be a
those
10-year
who don't
plan.
understand what it is you guys do at all, can you kind of explain the purpose of your role in having a management plan? Because I think some people just assume that the forests are unmanaged and grow wild and there's nobody taking care of them.
Right. Yeah, the state forest is a working forest. It is legislatively mandated that forest provides lots of different values, and some of those values are timber and forest products. Other values would be like outdoor recreation, things like trails and streams and aquatic habitat. All of those things matter, right? So it's important when we're managing. The DNR is in charge of managing this publicly owned forest, which is broken up into 3 different sections. It's the northern lower peninsula, the east UP, and the west UP, and that makes up the 4 million acres. We try to set some desired future conditions for that forest, and then we attempt to make different management objectives and actions to get us from where we are today to what those desired future conditions are. And we do that through active forest management, which is mostly harvesting, some prescribed burning, opening maintenance, things like that. So lots of thinnings, clear cuts, different silvicultural treatments, we call them, to help steer the forest in different directions and manage for a variety of wildlife habitat and kind of get it in a good place. The key here is to ensure that we've got a diverse ecosystem that can really adapt to change as things happen, like the ice storm.
Gotcha. All right, Dan Hackman, Michigan DNR, thank you so much for your time on this Thursday morning. A lot of insight into a world that very few people understand and know even exists. Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.